it's kind of all fallen neatly for me, really. Even though I didn't want to leave the NHS, I'm glad I did, because it's taken me further afield into other things I wouldn't have worked in, like homelessness and drug addiction. And of course, these things are all connected. Everyone who's homeless has got mental health problems. You would have mental health problems being homeless, even if you didn't before. But most people become homeless because they're rejected as kids or they're not wanted. So that's why you get mental health problems. So homelessness and mental health are the same issue.
Hi, I'm Naomi Murphy, and this is the Locked Up Living podcast, where we talk with a wide range of people about harsh aspects of institutional life.
We also explore some of the ways to overcome them and to grow and develop. I'm David Jones. So join us every Wednesday morning, 6 o'clock UK time, for a fresh podcast.
Really delighted to welcome along today Martin Seager. Martin is a consultant clinical psychologist and adult psychotherapist, most recently with the addictions charity CGL between 2016 and 2020. He's a clinician, lecturer, campaigner and author on mental health issues. He studied at Oxford University, Edinburgh University and the Tavistock Clinic, and he worked in the NHS for over 30 years and was head of psychological services in 2 large mental health trusts. Martin is unusual in that he had a regular mental health slot on BBC Essex radio between 2003 and 2007, and was also on BBC Radio 5 Live Up All Night between 2007 and 2009. In 2006, he formed a national mental health advisory group for the Health Secretary at the time, Patricia Hewitt. And in 2010 to 2011, he worked in the homelessness field with the charity St Mungo's and also the Big Issue. Martin spent over 10 years as a branch consultant to the Central London Samaritans and was a member of the Mental Health Advisory Board for the College of Medicine. He's now on the clinical advisory board of the campaign against Living Miserably. His passion is to promote a psychologically minded approach to science, public health and human well-being, moving away from treating mental conditions to meeting the psychological needs of the human condition. He's a specialist on male gender psychology and co-founder of both the Male Psychology Network and the Male Psychology section of the BPS. He's co-editor of the Palgrave Handbook of Male Psychology and Mental Health in 2019, which includes a chapter on gamma bias theory, which he developed with John Barry. Very extensive, diverse career then, Martin. Really pleased to have you here to talk.
Read back to you like that.
Yeah, well, we're really looking forward to digging into some of that with you. Thanks for coming along.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Yeah, I'm very pleased to meet you, Martin. You've had a long and very interesting career, and our paths have crossed at several times, but at different periods, I think.
Right.
Since I also worked with the homeless via the Simon community and the Cyrenians, and I've also been involved with the drugs field through the Lee community.
Yes.
So I think we've got a lot in common. Anyway, you've had this very long career and worked in a wide variety of services. Can you tell us a bit about how you come to make decisions about the sort of things you choose to do?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I don't think you're always conscious of that, and certainly my career has always been mainly with adult mental health. So why adults, I suppose, to some degree, I suppose it's because it's the widest age range, it goes from, you can work with teenagers right up to old people, really. So it doesn't limit your scope for the human condition. I think when I started in the NHS, I was just looking for a department that wasn't completely CBT focused. Not that I hate CBT, I've been trained in it. I just wanted a department that thought a bit more systemically and dynamically as well. I found one, and also it's just where I lived. I've always been a bit of an Essex man. So although I trained in Edinburgh, I was living in the Essex area when I qualified. So I just found a local department, started there, and then it just happened to be promotions, really. If you're in adult mental health, you want to write about that and teach. Then a job came up with lecture attached to it, a lectureship. So I moved to South Essex because it had a lectureship there. All sort of standard stuff, really. And then my interest just became wider as I got more senior. I suppose I saw the applications of psychology could go wider than just sitting in a room doing treatment, which was, a very valid thing to do. I've done that all my life, but it's only one application of psychology, and probably the narrowest in many ways. My career choices have always been, as I've got more senior, I've just looked at, and also, to be brutally honest, I've been treated badly in 2 mental health trusts, so I had to move, because when you get to a very top position in psychology in the NHS, you can conflict with a medicalised culture. You end up in sort of conflict with medical directors. And then, of course, just people who just don't really get psychological thinking. There's a kind of resistance, which may be partly personal in some people, and you get cultures which are very not psychologically friendly. And even in mental health trusts, you think they'd be the most psychologically friendly places. It's not been my experience. But, I'm not sort of someone who hides his head under a parapet, so maybe I've triggered a few people along the way myself. But really, when I was working in one mental health trust, its budget for psychological services was only 5% of all its budget was spent on psychological. You'd think that a mental health trust would spend more than 5% of its budget on psychological stuff. So I was fighting that kind of thing. So these are the kinds of things our society is still struggling with. Is psychology really a serious thing? I think it's moved on. People recognize talking therapies now, but they only recognize them as an equivalent to drugs. You've either got to give someone a drug or talk to them, as if that's a realistic choice. As if they don't need chalk and cheese in different aspects of their lives. Of course, psychology is always involved, even if you're giving drugs. You're having a relationship with someone which has power, compassion, some expectations and attachment. So you can't give drugs without a relationship, without psychological impact anyway. So all these things increasingly interested me as I went through the health service. And I was sort of forced out of the health service, really. So I've gone more into the charity sector. So having politically clashed with a mental health trust, I then ended up in the charity sector. So that's my job choices have been chosen partly by no longer being welcome in the NHS, which is a bit sad. Although I went back to it, I had to do frontline jobs just to get my pension. So I got my pension, NHS pension out, which is nice because I deserved it, I think. But I've been working mainly with the charity sector. And of course, that's more looking widely at homelessness, drug addiction. It's kind of all fallen neatly for me, really. Even though I didn't want to leave the NHS, I'm glad I did, because it's taken me further afield into other things I wouldn't have worked in, like homelessness and drug addiction. And of course, these things are all connected. Everyone who's homeless has got mental health problems. You would have mental health problems being homeless, even if you didn't before. But most people become homeless because they're rejected as kids or they're not wanted. So that's why you get mental health problems. So homelessness and mental health are the same issue. Taking drugs is just self-medication for feeling bad. So all these things are just linked. And then, of course, crime as well. It will end up people who are damaged are more likely to damage someone. So it's all linked stuff. So I just got more and more interested in the.
There's a lot there, Martin. But clearly, from what you're saying, you're somebody who's been able to kind of view the wide panorama of human activities and identify things that interest you, and then you've been able to go and because of your experience and qualifications, you've been able to go and follow some slightly different paths, and that's clearly a great quality which you have. You also mentioned, of course, difficulties encountered with some of the management and medical power structures in the NHS, which I think we could do a whole podcast on, because I think it's so important, and so many bad things have come out of the kind of power inequalities that you find within the NHS. I'm sure it exists in other structures as well. But
it's a human failing generally,
It's a human failing, and we do tend to perhaps focus on it a lot in the health service, but it's a major issue, it seems to me. Maybe you should come back to that one day.
Well, I was also really interested to hear you talking about how much you valued working more broadly than as a therapist as well, because I think quite often psychologists, clinical psychologists do end up in roles where they are just doing therapy, and whilst that is a really lovely part of the role, actually there are other professional groups that it's cheaper to employ, so it doesn't make good economic sense to employ psychologists if you're only using them as therapists, when you think about how much of the training is focused on much more strategic tasks.
Yeah, no, that's always been my concern too, because when I went to clinical psychology, and I'm old enough for that to be in the 80s, I was always told how broad clinical psychology was. And if you think about it, clinical psychology is the equivalent of clinical biology. What is clinical biology? Just medicine generally. It doesn't limit you. There are medics who go out into politics, who go into foreign countries to change things. They get involved in war zones, or they get involved in changing the world a bit. I think psychologists need to think the same way. I mean, psychology is part of human nature. In fact, psychology determines everything, really. The way people think, that their minds are just determining what their bodies get up to, really. So we really do need to be thinking broader than just sitting in a room. I mean, I started out as a clinical psychology trainee doing behavioural treatment for people with thunderstorm phobia. That's where you start. And it was valuable because all these levels are valuable. But if you're a clinical psychologist, you're bound to get interested in why the broader issues around mental health, and what just treating an individual in a room is taking the medical model. So I mean, psychologists are always attacking the medical. I find it very ironic because you see so many psychologists slagging off the medical model, but they're really just doing the same thing. It's almost as if they just want to compete with the medical model rather than actually do something. And of course, the medical model is fantastically important because we are biological creatures as well. We need doctors. And even in mental health, we need doctors. We need people who know about the medical side of it to calm people down when they're unreachable. People can be very distressed in ways you can't talk to them at a certain point. You need real medical expertise. It's not about this childish fight between mental psychology and biology. It's just about, if you're a psychologist, why would you just wait for someone to refer someone to you? Yeah, when I joined the Samaritans as an advisor to the London branch, I suddenly realized if I helped them with their training about how they listen to callers, I could have more impact on more people than if I just sit in the NHS waiting for someone to refer someone to me. Much as I love doing that, it's not a bad thing. It's just not the only thing. In fact, it's not even the main thing, because I did a review, the Samaritans commissioned me in 2010 to do a review of why talking helps people. They didn't then publish it or use it, but it was an internal thing. But I just said, well, if you look at all the ways in which people talk to each other, families, friends, work colleagues, people in the church, communities, team managers, we're all influencing each other psychologically all the time. We're all having conversations which change attitudes, which challenge feelings. We're doing psychology all the time in our lives. And 99% of the interactions which make your mental health better are done outside of professional psychology. Teachers, psychologists, we should be supporting all the conversations that are happening in mental health, not simply just becoming clinicians. But we have to have that clinical knowledge to then go out, because that's the other problem. When you start saying things like that, people think, well, I don't need to be a psychologist. Anyone can do this. You can just talk to anybody nicely and you help their mental health. You don't have to have any training. That's dangerous as well, because clinical psychology taught me a massive amount of scientific thinking, massive amount of knowledge about the human condition. And you can make it sound simple, but integrating all that stuff takes a lot of years of development. But yeah, I mean, I realized in the early 2000s, when I was in my 40s, that I should really be reaching more people. I did the radio thing for that reason as well. The BBC offered me that chance to do a sort of phone in on mental health for 2 years. And that was really helpful. And you're reaching more people. Obviously, you could do it well or badly. It's like anything. there's all sorts of people out there in the media doing awful things, saying awful things about psychology who aren't really very good at it, or, you know, but equally, that's all the more reason why people who do know what they're doing, I think, to get out there and actually spread some science without going over the top, because if you start becoming too prominent in the media, it sort of undermines your ability to do your job in confidential ways with people without your media profile getting in the way. So I've consciously not tried to push that too much, but at the same time, you do need some kind of media presence. I'm doing this podcast, I think it's really nice that people like you are doing this. You know, you're doing what I think is a great thing, of putting out professionally thoughtful podcasts that might change a few attitudes, you know.
Well, let's hope. Clearly, Martin, you're a person who believes that psychological concepts should be spread outside of the NHS.
Oh, yes.
What do you think is the best way that psychologists can do this? They can't all do a radio show, after all.
No. Well, I just think there's something else I do in a local community with another psychologist. We do a drop-in our local church, which is free, and people with mental health issues or just worries about that side of life can just come in and from the community and talk to us. But we also have befrienders there, so they can just come and have a friendly conversation. So you can make a community feel a bit more contained by just having a place where people can drop in. I mean, just anything. If one of my main interests is male psychology. I mean, young boys, just getting a good football team with a really decent mentor who's managing and looking after and creates a family impact, creates a fatherly kind of presence in the lives of some boys who might not have a father figure. That's a massive thing to do. Much better than doing CBT on a young man when he's 48 and has been in a bad marriage, you know. Stick him in a football team when he's younger and give him a father figure. He might never get to that point, you know, because so I'm thinking of psychology as something that's in nature. It's not, we don't own it any more than a doctor owns our bodies. We don't own people's minds. We're just simply people who study that and want to think about how to apply that knowledge. And really, most great psychology is in the arts. Any good novel, you know, so we're not the only people doing it. I mean, if you read a good novel, you're going to understand the human condition probably better than if you read most psychology textbooks. The way they're written can sometimes put you off psychology.
So it sounds as if perhaps one of the things you're saying is that the beginning point is something about developing a perspective which goes beyond the consulting room or the clinic. Yeah,
and I would say my overall philosophy is, first of all, a science-based one. You have to have an epistemology. I mean, I don't believe the universe is simply material, for starters, time, space driven, because we've got a Western science basically reduces the mind to the brain. So you're already lost, because anything about connecting with people is lost, because it's assumed that you're treating someone in a mechanical way, which will change brain chemistry or change even an attitude, has some schema in the brain or something. We're basically very reductionist in our Western science. And that means psychology is seen as a junior partner to physical sciences. So I think that the spirit, the human spirit, everything that matters in life is in the psychological domain, really. It's in our spirit, our hearts. You know, you can lose someone you love and yourself die the next week because you just can't live anymore. You just lose the will to live. So I think psychology and the human spirit is the biggest part of the human condition, if we had to choose. But I think obviously, you know, the body's massively important. The two connect. You know, Romanian orphans who were not adopted into good homes didn't thrive. The ones that were loved did. They had the same physical shelter. Prisoners who have physical shelter and something to eat, they still hang themselves because they've got all the psychological needs are not being met. They don't feel valued, loved. They're alone. They're not seeing their kids. They're just, you know, so all this in homelessness, you know, we treat homelessness as if someone's lacking a house, you know, so we give them a roof over their head and a bowl of soup. That doesn't give them relationships, a sense of worth, purpose. So psychology is very much in human nature. It's in everything that we're interested in, all our art. We spend half our time listening to popular songs about love. And yet no psychologist has ever factor analysed pop songs. If you did that, you would find attachment theory was completely demonstrated to 0.0001. You know, that every song is about love, don't leave me, please stay. So these are the things that attachment this is a core part of human condition. So we've designed all our mental health services without taking account of attachment. So you see different people, you get appointments that don't fit with the last person you saw, you get discharged as if everything's finished, the relationship is finished. We just don't have a relationship-friendly model because we think of in material terms. You know, you need a treatment, so you turn up in a building, you see a doctor, you've had a treatment. But no, you're seeing a different person, different relationship. You wouldn't do that to a child, say, well, you've got a different dad today. You know, you have the same relation. So my whole philosophy is about preserving attachments to people. And that just means following them through. You know, it doesn't mean I have to see them very often, but I don't disappear from people's lives generally. I just sort of remain in the background, and they have an emergency, they can call me out. And that way they're not feeling discharged. They're feeling like they've just grown up and gone their own way, but they've still got this mentor figure in their lives. And I think once you take that approach, we can, you know, we could really improve and save money, because the whole science is medical, and then our approach is derived on a reductionist, depersonalized model. And of course, depersonalization is what causes mental health problems in the first place. So if our mental health system is depersonalizing and our clients are depersonalized, how the hell do we expect anything to get too much better?
As you're talking, Martin, it made me think of, we interviewed David Boyle about tick box culture, but as you were talking, it really made me think about that, because that pressure on numbers, you know, there's this emphasis on how many individuals can you see as a therapist during the course of a week. But actually, if you're working, for instance, in an inpatient setting, some of those informal contacts, bobbing on to the ward, not having your office separate from the ward, being part of the ward team, just being in the vicinity. I mean, certainly in the Fens, where I was clinical director, our offices were converted cells above where the prisoners lived. And that meant that we were available, they could see us interacting with other people, and gradually build up trust, which you don't get in a different kind of service, for instance. So I don't think there's enough sophisticated thinking about some of those nuances, is there? It's all about get people in for something that's countable.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And what you're describing there is what I would call professional family. In other words, you're creating a culture where people are all part of a family atmosphere, and all the prisoners start to feel like they've got people that they can sort of trust and look up to. So you're repairing some of the damage that was done that made them get into such a bad way that the crime became their sort of path, because they didn't have a family. And okay, it's not being soft on people, it's just creating conditions which help them improve. Because you know, if people are dangerous, you've either got to lock them up forever. If they can change, you've got to try and change them, but you can't. The idea that it isn't punitive to be in a prison already is a bit naive if no one's ever lived in one, or been in one, if they think that. But at the end of the day, yes, what you've got to do, we've got to have a model of what human health is, what human good mental health is. This is why I take a public health sort of philosophy, because if you go to Soho and you see that water pump where John Snow, the pioneer of epidemiology, he realized cholera was being caused by the water supply. So he took the handle off the pump. People stopped dying. That's the kind of psychologist I am, you know. And what is the water supply in mental health? It's love, you know. If you're just not loved as a person, you hate yourself, you want to take it out on someone else, that's it. So it's not about being a hippie and sort of loving people who are nasty. It's just about creating conditions where you do over time build up trust and respect. You do begin to realize that someone is listening to you. So you start to hear yourself, you start to hear your own voices, you begin to integrate your personality, you begin to feel more secure, you're less at risk of harming yourself or others, because you have been in an atmosphere where someone has treated you like you're in a family. I mean, if you haven't had a family experience, you've got to have one. So you can't just have CBT, it doesn't replace a family. A house, a hostel doesn't replace a family, which is why homeless people often, it's not enough. They even trash. Sometimes they can't cope with being given something that's physically good because it doesn't reflect the inner damage. People are damaged on the inside. So psychological approach should be everywhere. If you're a psychiatrist, often say this to psychiatrists, you're being insulted. If people think all you're doing is giving out drugs and that's what helps people, they're ignoring your personality, the relationship you have with people, all the stuff you do with them. As psychiatrists, when they're helpful for psychological reasons, not just biological ones. And of course, psychologists, when they're not helpful, just be called a psychologist, psychiatrist doesn't make you helpful, in my view. It's the psychological factors going on in a relationship that will make it help someone or not. It doesn't matter what your profession is, but obviously, if you need to have psychological expertise to have that model, to understand that's what's going on. That's why I spend my life now thinking about that. How do you create psychologically minded organizations? A prison is a perfect example, Doesn't mean to say you're not disciplining people, punishing them, because that's what part of parenting is. With kids, you don't just soft with kids, you have to discipline them. So, it's not about being hard or soft, it's about love and discipline. All children need that. And you get that originally in families or in communities. And I think to some extent, psychology should have a big role to play in designing policies, really, political policies on public mental health, how you design schools, how many kids should be in a classroom. I mean, I'm sure there are psychologists advising government on things like that, educational psychologists probably, but we don't think widely enough. If you want to have a good teaching relationship with pupils and teachers, you need to think about, well, how many pupils can a teacher have in their head before they forget them all? Same as how many patients can a doctor have before they forget them all? Because if you're talking to a doctor who's forgotten you, that's like being neglected, and then you're repeating mental health problems, not curing them. So these are the things we should be thinking a lot more about, I think.
Yeah, that's very very true. But there's a difficulty, isn't there? Because in a way, we kind of know these things. You're describing them very, very well. Earlier in the week, I was doing an interview with a probation officer who had a perfect understanding of the kind of attachment issues that you're describing. And she gave me a wonderful case example.
Yeah.
And all her work has been fractured now because the prison service have introduced something called OMIC, which means that probation officers no longer have any contact with the people they were working with. It's handed over to people inside the prison. And we've also now got a Minister of Justice who says we've got to stop calling prisoners residents, we've got to call them prisoners. And I'm sure he's got psychologists somewhere who are advising him to say it probably helps a bit if places are a bit more humane and relationships are supported and encouraged. In fact, they're spending a lot of money on developing relational programs, aren't they?
Yeah.
But there's this kind of conflict between the political demands and the kind of thing you're describing.
Yeah.
How can one deal with that?
Well, that's very difficult, because when you talk to politicians, and I do, they're always saying, well, yeah, we need the evidence that this works before we can justify public money. Then you do some kind of weird pilot, which is totally unrelated to anything in real life. And then if it's politically sellable, it gets approved. It all becomes so diluted. We all know from watching the telly or reading a book or just listening to our friends what real life is. You can't distill that into sensible policies. I mean, as psychologists, we're trying to observe the patterns in things. We're scientists, what are the patterns? What can we predict if we do X or Y? What will be the outcomes? What are the risks? We're doing this stuff. So yeah, it's like you get intelligent individuals, but it all ends up being a very stupid system. And that is very sad. And what can you do? Yeah, it's a very good point, because at the end of the day, you end up in some meeting with a politician with 20 other people, and it all gets diluted into a document with a few recommendations, and common sense can go out the window. I think in my particular my particular hope is that I've got a new role coming up, which will help me in that respect, because I'm going to be working with an airline that's hopefully going to you know give some money for good causes, quite a bit of money in the future, and I will have a role in deciding what good causes we fund. And if we can do stuff, just do it psychologically properly, and then show that it works, then we might be able to persuade people with taxpayers' money to spend that on it. But it's just obvious things to me, really. But it's just like, if you want to help people with mental health problems, you've got to spend longer time with them. Because I think even insurance companies that do insure private therapies their evidence is that they brief therapies don't tend, they do tend to pay for longer therapies, because sometimes it's shown that brief therapies aren't really good value for money. But at the end of the day, politics always comes down to, can you prove this works before you even try it, and where are we going to get the money from? And there are differing opinions, of course. It's not, but so what seems like common sense, by the time it's gone through a number of filters and meetings, and depends who you know. I mean, I only got hold of Patricia Hewitt in the Blair government because I emailed her persistently and eventually gave in. But and then in this current government, one or two people that I'm sort of privately talking to. So it's sort of, you're trying to make a difference, but at the end of the day, psychology is inherent even in the politics too. Because if you think about why do meetings, if you're in a meeting psychology dictates, if you're in a meeting with more than 8 people, it's now no longer personal. If you have a meeting with 8 people, you can have a family feeling. And that's why therapy groups tend to be about 8 people. If you go over 10 people, it starts to become a committee, and then the way things get decided, or so it's the psychology of politics as well. And of course, I think the best way to do good stuff is generally people with their own money just doing it, getting on with it. Whatever your views on Elon Musk or whatever, he's just bought Twitter. They'll probably make some changes that, if they work, people will be happy. They'll be his changes, because he'll probably have some influence over. I think at the end of the day, if you're a good person with power, you can do good things. It's just that a lot of people with power tend to get corrupted, or it all gets diluted. So I think if a charity, if this airline I'm working with can give me funds to do some really seriously good things, for example, like build homes for homeless kids in India, which is one thing we're going to do, and build a community centre, say in London, in a borough of London, for young people, where they get mentored into craft skills, music. They get allowed time to do make recordings of their own music, free studio time. They can write their own plays and put them on. I think if you do that for young people in the community, and they can all be part of something, you'll probably find their mental health goes right up. But you'll take a few years to prove it. But I won't care, because if it's our own money, we can just do it. At the end of the day, what stops things happening is the political cycle. Even in the NHS, I noticed really good mental health teams, fantastic relationships, everyone got on. They got broken up. And you were saying that about the probation service. Just some model comes in, someone gets imposed on things, and it's top-down, toxic kind of planning. And the political cycle is every 5 years, so people want to prove they've made a difference by changing everything around. So, you lose cultures, but we know what works we do have this common sense somewhere, but my colleague Valerie Sinnison always calls it uncommon sense. Because it's sense, but it's not very common. So I think my brutal answer to that question is, I'm just going to hope someone gives me loads of money to try it myself, these things. And then if I can prove it, someone else will spend taxpayers' money on it, hopefully. But a lot of innovators have set up their own things, haven't they? If you look at the world, it's changed by innovators who do their own thing, independent kind of people. Institutions and organizations very rarely do anything. They often reject your appeals, like even in the wartime, you have these great ideas for shortening the war, and you have to go through millions of committees, and lots of people don't think it's a good idea, it's a waste of money, and so much resistance to doing anything that even seems sensible. So that's just the human condition, I think.
Yeah. So I suppose the task for the rest of us is managing our frustration.
Yeah, and I think doing what you can do, and sort of because I think, you know, although I say I try to think wider, I mean, some of my most satisfying moments in life have been those moments of connection with individual people, and you just connect them with damage to it. You help free them from damage they've been living with for years, trauma or just a whole sense of who they are changes into something less awful. And you feel that in the room, and you feel their gratitude, or you feel that, you know, it's tearfully sacred to be able to be with someone and change their life in that way. I'm sure you do that work, you know, Naomi does it in prisons. I know, you know, just to have that connection with another human being who's changed and grown in your presence. You don't make it happen. You're a catalyst. You know, we're not creating people's health. We're just facilitating natural processes. If someone's really listening to you, you will change as a person. If someone isn't listening to you, you won't change. Because sometimes when someone really listens to you, you realize why you're wrong yourself. You know, and I think that's when in therapy myself, I had my own therapy, and you realize when you hear what comes out of your own mouth, just because someone's really listening to you, you sort of hear yourself better. So these are very subtle things, and no one talks about them enough, but that's the most sacred thing you can do. So the only reason I'm thinking wider is because we want to do that for as many people as possible, not because that isn't the gold standard. The gold standard is human connection. And that's why I stayed in the NHS for so long with all the frustrations, because it's a wonderful thing as well, and the people in it are wonderful. And some of the things that you can do are wonderful. And you do have failings and you do make mistakes, but psychological problems can be so complex. You have to spend a few years. And of course, when I was in the position to offer long-term therapy in the NHS, because I was the head of the service, so I suppose I allow that to happen. I allowed myself and others to work longer term. We always got better results. But yeah, so I think it is important to find satisfactions in what you can do, but to think wider, but to not be overwhelmed by depression that you can't change the world, because also that can become a bit narcissistic. You know, we want to change the world and want just to make ourselves feel great, you know, that we're so wonderful, we're changing the world. Obviously, changing the world is what we should all be wanting to do for the better, but just to live your own life and not do any harm is a good start. Let's try and be a decent person and just help the people you can help. Otherwise, you go mad with all the people that you can't help, because there's so much going on in the world.
I just find it ironic there's so much emphasis on short-term sessional work in the NHS, because actually that is people who can quickly benefit from that are often people whose problems are not as extensive, but also that kind of work is much more affordable. So actually, if you had to pay for psychological intervention, it would be that would be within the budget of many people, whereas the long-term, more complex work that's needed, and the people who are most desperately in need of that are people who perhaps don't have jobs, have all sorts of other issues going on, and so it's never going to be within their realm of affordability.
Yeah, I mean, the NHS has really ended up becoming a short-term, offering short-term solutions with long waiting lists for people with long-term problems. So it's kind of misdesigned. You know, you spend the right amount of time with each person and you will get better results. And the primary care should be more psychologically minded, that they wouldn't be filtering through so much. And also, we're causing more mental health problems because families, we're not supporting parenting, men or women. We're not incentivizing people to be with their kids. We're not incentivizing teachers to be mentors. We're just looking at exam results. We're basically psychologically illiterate in many ways, and our kids, therefore, mental health sort of even before the COVID scenario, mental health of kids was reducing, and we're not looking at the public mental health issues. We're just looking at reactive treatments. It's like everyone who gets cholera in Victorian times, they tried to give them anti-cholera, 6 sessions of anti-cholera treatment. That's what we're doing instead of changing the water supply. And really, that's my model. Let's change the water supply. But when someone does get cholera, let's give them a treatment, of course. But let's try and prevent these mental health problems by looking at the causes. Basically, kids need secure attachments with adults in their families and their communities. The more we take away secure attachments from children in their families and communities, the more we're building up mental health problems. And that's what psychologists should be saying, not just being better at CBT than the next professional. So clinical psychology has become quite narrow. It's just become, and I think that was the darker side of the IAPT program, because I was involved in those early days of that, and I could foresee some of this stuff happening. There was become a quick fix that the government money would just go from something to IAPT. It wouldn't be new money. They would just have less counselling, or something, because it wasn't evidence-based, which is rubbish, because the only evidence base is for a good relationship. All the predictors of good outcomes in therapy come from the relationship. Not that the techniques are unimportant, but the techniques only come into play if you've got a good relationship in which to use them. So yeah, that IAPT thing it put talking therapies on the map, but then it reduced them to something brief and rather mechanical, and almost medicalized them, so that it's almost just like an alternative to a drug instead of a relationship. A relationship is not an alternative to a drug. People only take drugs because they're suffering. They're only suffering because their relationships aren't working. So, it's all circular, really.
The IAPT project caused great resentment, of course, because, as you say, it really led to a shifting of funding from one place to another. And I know a lot of the work that you've done has been trying to kind of work around that kind of competitiveness between different brands of therapy.
Yeah. I mean, the brands of therapy are important, but there's over 200 of them, so they can't all be doing something totally different. I mean, when I got that group for Patricia Hewitt together of eminent people, it was really to say, let's forget the differences. What are the things all these therapies have in common? That should be the evidence base that government should be using in its policies. It's not, is CBT better than psychodynamic therapy, and let's have more CBT. It should be, what do CBT and psychodynamic therapy have in common? And let's train everyone at different levels in that. And really, the key thing that all these things have in common is a secure attachment, someone who's listening to you for a reasonable period of time. I mean, it's not rocket science, really. If you have secure attachment to someone who's going to listen to you for a reasonable period in your life could change. If you don't have that, no technique in the world is going to change anything except a very minor problem. And of course, as we know, the NHS is now weeding, you have to go through hoops to even get to pass the criteria for, I can understand it's about budgets, but at the end of the day, it all becomes, there isn't a psychologically minded philosophy. This is the thing. So this is what psychologists we should be doing, not just arguing that psychological treatment models of work as well as drugs. That's the wrong question. We should be saying everything is psychological, even if you're giving drugs, you've got to give them in a way that's empathic. You can give someone a drug just to shut them up. You can listen to someone really carefully and give them a drug that really eases their suffering and is a compassionate relationship. And in that, you change the person psychologically too. So a good medical relationship will have psychological impacts too. And a bad psychological relationship, a good psychological relationship is changing your brain chemistry, because we know, science tells us that where you love children, even brain development changes. There's loads of evidence that the brain development itself, the brain doesn't thrive in its development in the same way if a child is not loved. It's not just food and drink. So love is the food of life. And it does sound a bit like a hippie, but really, if children are loved, their mental health, they become resilient, as long as they're disciplined as well. Because if you just love kids and you don't discipline them, that isn't really love, because you're not thinking of developing them. You're just thinking of them as a love object to yourself. That's narcissistic. But if you actually love and discipline kids, they grow healthy. And even that's even reflected in biology. It's not like there's a war between biology and psychology, because what is the brain other than a learning machine? Psychology is all about environments and what we know. Well, you can't do that without a brain. So the brain and the mind are interwoven, but they're not the same thing. Reducing one to the other is the problem, because then you'll have any doctor is regarded as an expert on mental health, which is a bit crazy, because no one is going to ask me to do an operation on anybody just because I'm a psychologist. So it's a one-way thing where we privilege biological knowledge. Having said that, all the anti-psychiatric stuff, I'm not really a part of that, because psychiatry at its best was just humane application of curative philosophy to other disorders than the physical ones. And some of the great pioneers of psychology were doctors to begin with. The best ones probably Freud, and all the rest. And the only reason they got into psychology was they realized medicine was not enough. And of course, that's the sad thing now. We're going back to thinking that everything's to do with the brain and everything's neuro, even empathy is in the mirror neurons or something. Everything's reduced to physical attributes, which was where Freud came from. He thought, well, he looked at all his early hysteria patients. He realized that the neurology didn't fit the symptoms. It was the mind. It was the interpretation of what the meaning of people's lives that was causing them distress. We seem to have gone backwards again. We're trying to reduce everything to neurology. And of course, Freud fought that battle over 100 years ago, and we're having to fight it again, it seems.
So changing the focus slightly, Martin, in your article, Who Cares for the Carer, you write about the concept of mind blindness within the context of caring for others. Can you say a bit about what you mean by that?
Yeah, it's just really more of the same thing. We're mind blind I think, in a way, I was picking up on Baron Cohen's idea in autism of this sort of mind blindness. I was saying, well, therefore, when you're looking about caring for people in any respect, if I'm going to see a doctor for help and that doctor's burned out because they've seen 800 people before they see me, they're not listening to me. So if you want to care for patients in the health service or in anything, you must care for the people caring for them, because the care you receive is only as good as the mental state of the person you're seeking help from. Let's take a single mother who's got 5 children. One might have lovely support from grandparents and therefore she can process being a mother, because the stress of the demands of the baby or the young children is mitigated by other relationships where she can process that and enjoy her babies and her children. If she's just on her own without any help, she's going to be overwhelmed and she's going to be stressed out. Then those children are going to become more stressed and they are going to stress her out. You get a vicious cycle of stress. So I regard caring professions as like, we're going to people for care. If they are not in a mental state to provide it, we're not going to get it. And then everyone loses, because the carer doesn't get job satisfaction. The person who needs the care is going to be neglected. So that's why I think it's more than an individual issue. If we've got brilliant nurses on a ward, but there's so much demand that they never get a break, they start to burn out, then, you get mistakes made. And then, of course, you get all the publicity about nurses not being, bad publicity. But obviously, nurses on average are more caring than anyone else. That's why they chose that profession. But if you get overwhelmed and burned out, you might start switching off. And that's something psychologists should be looking at more. What is how do we keep people from becoming burned out? And how do we design care environments so that they remain receptive to the patients? Because there's a load of research on these. There's loads of psychodynamic research on the way that countertransference happens in mental health as well. If you've got damaged people on a psychiatric ward, they're all looking for good parents, but they're all attacking you because they've had such traumatic experiences. They're retaliating against the bad objects in their previous life. So in a mental health institution, you're going to have very difficult people all in one place, and then the staff are going to be shutting down just to cope with the pressure of that, and then the patients aren't going to get what they need. And then you just get this sort of expansion of dysfunction, and you get staff leaving or burning out, or only the ones that survive it are the ones that switch off. So that's no good, because if you're a damaged person and you're trying to get attention, you need someone to pay your attention in a good way. Because all people who seek attention in bad ways are people who never got attention in a good way. So that was the only way they could get it. So until you can give them good attention, they're always going to get bad attention, all these things. So if we don't if we don't have a model of supporting the mental state of those providing the care, then we're not going to give very good care. And of course, the way we treat nurses and doctors and psychologists in the health service sometimes I sometimes felt the management culture was something I was fighting rather than something I was being helped by. So, and one thing I would definitely do if I get this charity money to do good causes is I would have retreats for healthcare staff, just give them free retreats for a few days. Because not only symbolically is that valuing someone, so that in itself is like saying you mean something. The health service values you, so it's giving you a retreat, but also it's psychologically enabling you to process trauma, vicarious trauma. Because if you're listening to, Naomi in particular, working in prisons, you must hear some pretty horrendous stuff every day. And obviously, psychologists, we do get supervision, we do process that stuff. It's part of our ethos, which is why we need to be, demonstrating the way on some of this stuff. But if you're hearing this stuff every day, traumatic stuff, and you're not processing that, there comes a point when you can't keep hearing it. And we need to therefore build in refreshment, debriefing, breaks. We need to maintain healthy relationships between caregivers and patients. It seems pretty obvious when you talk about it. And as I say, any good story will always involve those kind of relationships, and any bad story is where they go wrong. We know sort of what goes right or wrong. And as you said earlier, how do we fix that? It's much harder politically. But yeah, I would certainly, the key thing, if you want patients to get good care in any system, is look after the people they're turning to for help. Because if they're not in a state to listen, you haven't got any chance at all of helping them. However skilled someone is, if you're burning out, your skills only take you so far. And you can't, so this resilience thing is okay up to a point, but if the system is not enabling you to refresh and process all the stuff you're putting up with every day, then you will cease to function, and both for yourself and for others. And of course, people who are mentally distressed are very sensitive to when they're being heard or not. It's like manna from heaven when they do feel heard, but they're also very honest about, they know when you're not listening. So you can't fake it. I've been at times in the NHS very tired, and I know I'm not really listening very well. And people pick that up, really. There are times when you hope to be more honest about, your own state, at least within your own mind, so that you're not. The worst thing is if you're in a bad state for listening, but you're not aware of that, and you're sort of blaming everyone else or everything else. So, but it's the same as what happens in families, a child wanting to talk to mum or dad, and mum or dad's reading the newspaper, and it's just the same human thing. And of course,
David's also spent a lot of time working in prisons, and part of our motivation for doing this podcast actually was that things that are nourishing and good, conversations about things like love, as you spoke about, are things that often get quashed within forensic systems. There isn't really enough feeding of the stuff that can be nourishing, which was part of our motivation for this podcast, was to be able to give voice to some of these important concepts that don't really get heard enough.
Nutrition, being psychological nutrition, that's the big one for me. I think I would say it was, if you had to boil it down to something, it was just love. But obviously that sounds a bit like too soft. But at the end of the day, it is caring. call it agape love, if you like. Agape being the sort of love for your fellow human, not any other form. You know, we have not enough words for love, really. We just have the one word. But yeah, agape love is nutritional for the soul. And if you don't have that, people will just not care anymore. They will do the most extreme and violent things, because what have they got to lose? They live in a world where no one cares who they are or what they are, or they don't even know who they are. So the more you get to know someone, the less dangerous or unhappy they will become. And even if someone's terminally ill, you know, and you might think they just want to forget about it, just to be heard, just to be listened, just to be at peace with, to know that you're in the presence of someone who gets, you know, who can hear you and not run away from your feelings. That can help. You know, even in death, we need quality of listening. But I think it really is, you know, we are a relational species. Everything points to that. We're forever reading books, watching TV about identifying with characters. Why do we spend all our time as human beings identifying with fictional characters? TV, you know, because we love to connect. We like to identify. And if you can just do a bit of that in mental health services, you're going to have, or just in society, you're going to have a healthier society.
So we often hear this term compassion fatigue.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of shorthand, isn't it, really? So to ameliorate that, I think I hear you saying that psychological nourishment can be very valuable. But is there a kind of temporal element to it as well? I mean, can one just be doing that kind of intensive work for too long?
Yes, I agree. It can be too long. When I was designing jobs, like in the NHS, I wouldn't want someone doing 5 days a week in the most intense environment. I'd say, well, have a day a week in maybe primary care, and then you specialise, but do something very different for one day a week. I used to design sort of split jobs for people. I enjoyed doing that because you could create a balance. Yeah, if you're just sitting with the most damaged people 5 days a week, it can be too intense. If you're a GP and just seeing, you know, people, you don't know who's coming through the door as a GP, it might be very severe. But even if you know you're just seeing less severe problems, that can be very draining as well, because you're not really getting to know people in the same level and you're not getting the satisfaction. So it's a balance. You have the human mind, the caring, you've only got so much energy for caring. So you have to, select people who really motivated to do it. You have to support them. You have to give them breaks and refreshment and nutrition. It seems obvious, really. You do that if you're playing football, wouldn't you? If you wanted to win a football match, you'd have the right diet, the right this, you know.
Martin, you're so erudite. I've hogged all the questions, so I'm wanting to ask Naomi to come in.
Well, I suppose I was curious, given your interest in male gender psychology, Martin, to know whether you think there's any sex differences that impact on a person's ability to elicit care or give care.
Yeah, I think there must be. I mean, I think not just, you know, obviously on average, men and women are choosing different occupations for starters. So if you look at gender differences in occupational choices across the world, so it's a species thing, it's not really cultural. You know, nurturing, caring roles are more on average chosen by females, and more sort of mechanical, if you like, jobs are on average more chosen by males. That's an average difference. So that means there are lots of women who want to be engineers, that's fine, lots of men who want to be carers. But psychology sort of comes in the middle, because when psychology was more of a laboratory type of thing, you had more men in it, I think, in the old days, if you like. Become more of a therapy discipline now. It's more, and 80% of psychologists are now women. So there are gender differences in people's interest in psychology. And then I think there are different styles. If you look at mums and dads, they parent a bit differently on average. You know, dads might sort of roughhouse and roll around and play silly games, physical games, more on average than mothers. And mothers would do other things and tune in differently. Men would do stuff with kids more, and the mothers may tune in a bit more to the feelings. So not trying to say men don't tune into feelings or women can't play physical games. I'm just saying there are gender differences. as psychologists, we shouldn't be shy away from. We are interested in differences, and that doesn't mean to say we're prescribing them, because I think one should be free to do whatever one wants, whatever way, wherever one's interest takes one. So just as we should allow, any girl to do whatever it might look like a traditional male role, that's great, and vice versa. We shouldn't be stopping people from doing traditional things just because we think they should be the opposite of the tradition either. That's equally crazy. Stopping. We shouldn't have quotas for these things. Just allow people to be who they want to be. But given we've said that, psychology in general, therapy culture, could be argued to be more feminized. It's based on talking about feelings in a room, one-to-one. Tell me how you feel. And that's more off-putting on average to men than women. So when we want men to seek help, we shouldn't just be saying, come on, guys, open up. It's the 22nd, it's the 21st century or whatever. You should be able to be more emotional now, because that's a bit naive. Men and women are different in how they solve things or try to solve. We should use designing therapies to be more male friendly. And of course, working in prisons, you guys, you're in a male environment anyway, so you probably become the leading thinkers about how to design male friendly interventions, because your whole population's, prisoners are 90-odd% men. So, but yeah, so I think there are sex differences in how styles of caregiving, which are important. They're not bad things. And equally, there are sex differences in how people might want to seek help. And I think we were a bit behind the times. I've just written, actually, with John Barry, the draft BPS guidelines for therapy with men and boys. So we've just written those. So again, it's about how to, because if we're trying to be empathic, we need to tune into who we're dealing with. If we deny gender differences, then we're denying empathy, because we're not nuancing our approaches to the characteristics of our client population. That would be a big no-no in psychological values. So we mustn't let our presumption of sexism get in the way of psychologically minded, nuanced approaches for men. And I've worked with some women who really can't bear emotional exploration. They just don't want it. And some women are more, we're all on a bit of a spectrum in terms of these things. There's average differences, and no one's all of one. But at the end of the day, I've worked with some guys who are great. And I went into psychoanalysis, so I was quite happy to do that. But I'm not your typical man in that respect, I suppose. And also, there's so many ways you can help people. And therefore, there are gender differences. I mean, if we want to help young guys, getting them into counselling isn't going to work. But if you get them into a brilliant football team or into a boxing club and really get alongside them and work with them, then they will open up in a different way to you. But if you just sit them in a room and say, tell me your dreams or something, tell me you just can't relate to young, damaged blokes that way easily.
Yeah, lots of a lot of the men that I've worked with have been would be viewed as being quite alpha males, spent a lot of time in the gym building themselves up, and actually have managed to connect with a vulnerable part of themselves that can talk in therapy.
Well, that's probably down to you.
Well, I guess there's something about if we're looking at other options for men to provide support to men, there still has to be an understanding of it would be no good telling everyone to get down boxing.
Oh no, exactly.
If it wasn't in the context.
You're back to tick boxing, ticking boxes, because that's where it always goes, where politics always goes wrong. If someone like me says, "Oh, young men do well in sport," then they'll start saying, you can't have therapy. You've got to go. It's the flexibility. I mean, I'm reminded of a story. I wrote a paper recently with a guy called Charlie Jones in a publication. And he came up with this anecdote of a nurse that was just giving hot chocolate at the end of the day to the patients, and it really made a difference to them. And the manager noticed that and made it a requirement that everyone gives hot. You see, you spoil the spontaneity of it. Yes. So some of the beauty of this stuff is the spontaneity. So yeah, if a guy who's pumping iron and in the gym, of course he's a human being, was a little baby once and had a mum, and there's a person in there who probably wants to be connected with. And how you do that, it might be that you start with the gym and then do you know what I mean? What you have to do is have that bigger picture of realizing that you're trying to connect with someone, and you can only connect with them where they are at that point. If you connect with them at one level, then maybe you'll connect with them at another level if you need to. But you have to connect with them at the level they're at that point. So yeah, someone who wants to talk about their feelings, doesn't want to be told to go down the gym. It's just all these one-size-fits-all policies. That's what goes wrong, and that's why we need psychological knowledge, like we have, because we can assess those nuances and formulate what's going to work for this person. And we don't just formulate it on our own; we formulate it with the client. We work out from them what's going to connect with them, and the skill of doing that is really quite complex and nuanced. So what looks like a simple intervention, like giving someone a gym session, might be the result of massively complex assessment, that will be the way to connect with that person at that point. But just prescribing a gym session for everyone because they're a man and they, all men should be down the gym, that's just no better than anything else. I mean, that's just prescriptive. So I agree with you there. And obviously, I think there are gender differences, but equally, obviously, we're all equally human. So that's the other thing. But men express their pain in different ways. They can get more into aggression and maybe more likely to get into drugs or alcohol, and men are often who are angry and are often not seen as hurt or vulnerable. And obviously you're usually both, aren't you? If you're doing damage to someone else, it's because you feel very hurt yourself and you're taking that out. So it's not like, are these good or bad people? We're all a mixture of good and bad, and some of us have had more damaging lives. And if you're a damaged man, you're going to behave differently than if you're a damaged woman. So there are gender differences in types of behavior, criminal behavior, and obviously at the end of the day, you're trying to reach someone. So I think psychology has a challenge to develop more male-friendly approaches, which we're trying to help do, and people like yourselves are doing that. But also to try and get a few more men into psychology, I think, because I think 80, much as I don't think it needs to be 50-50, I think 70-30 or 65-35 would be better. Because I think guys would be more likely to come into psychological help if there are more guys providing it, and more male-friendly sort of cultures within the health service, which tends, and counselling, generally it's the same thing, it's 80% women, psychotherapy 80% women. So there are gender differences and they're important, but equally, yes, they're just things you take account when you want to connect with someone. If a man's that's one thing we taught the Samaritan volunteers. If a guy's talking about football, don't try to switch him on to talking about his feelings. Make a connection with him about the football, because that way you're making a connection with him. If you start telling him to talk about his feelings, what you're saying is you're not interested in him. So how does that help him?
Yeah. So I agree with what you're saying. I'm really conscious of the time, Martin.
Yeah.
It would be quite easily spend, I think, hours sat here discussing these things with you. But I think we do need to be wrapping up. But just quickly before we go, one of the things we do like to ask people is, we've spent years working with many people with very complex psychological needs. How have you looked after your own well-being over time?
Not always successfully, I have to say. But, I've got a wonderful wife, so most stuff I tell her. I've got friends. I've had my own personal therapy for years, not now, but I do have mentors and people I do peer supervision with. I have quite a lot of my friends are psychologists or people who know about it, so I just talk through stuff in confidence, obviously, where appropriate. I play music, I write stuff. I I'm not doing it all the time now because I'm sort of semi-retired, but really I'm more busy in some ways as well. So yeah, I think I do an awful lot of walking and thinking. I don't know, it's really hard. I think it's different for everybody, but yeah. And of course, sometimes I don't always look after it very well, or, because I think sometimes you can't always control it. It does get overwhelming, but really, on the whole, I also have, I'm a Christian, so I have faith, that helps. That's obviously a big one, but it's not something I like to go on about too much. But I suppose, to be honest, you've got to say what these things are, that I'm very, that reboots me, because I think of bigger connections to things which are beyond just, the immediate material consequences of life. I think one does have to have beliefs in something, in philosophy that is, I suppose sometimes you're trying to, you can get too wound up by stuff that becomes your own, you can exaggerate you minimize or exaggerate your own importance in the universe sometimes, I think. So I think sometimes it's, when I'm overstressed, it's because sometimes I'm getting overwound up by stuff that isn't personal to me, and I shouldn't take it so personally. And I think that's the big one. You can try not to take everything personally, especially if you go on Twitter or something.
Oh gosh, yes.
You try not to take it personally. Just try to understand that someone's having a go at something that you represent in their mind, but isn't totally personal. They don't know you.
That was a fascinating conversation with Martin. He touched on so many of the things that we've been thinking about over the past year, and we've kind of been in and out of them a bit in the various podcasts that we've done. So we talked about resilience and compassion. And I think one of the things that really struck me that he said was to do with persistence, because several people have said that really, to make an impact with the things that you want to make an impact with, you just have to keep on doing them. You have to be very dogged.
Yeah, I remember Michael West and Roma Hooper both talked about that idea of revisiting and revisiting and revisiting. But I mean, so much of what he's got, so much experience, and so much of what he spoke about would have been very easy to go down a rabbit hole and spend a lot of time talking about that particular facet of the conversation. Yeah, so much rich knowledge to share there.